At a time when Israel is bombing Iran, the war along Israel's northern border has been intensifying. Israeli airstrikes are pounding Hezbollah targets in Lebanon while tanks push deeper into the south. But in a surprising turn, Hezbollah rockets have struck central Israel without warning sirens, a moment that has raised serious questions about Israel's defenses.
The skies above Lebanon are roaring with explosions. Israeli fighter jets are striking targets across Beirut and other Hezbollah strongholds. Lebanese residents describe the horror of the attacks.
We were sleeping. At around 5:30 a.m., I was asleep with my husband. My son was still awake after coming back from work. The sound was indescribable. The fear is indescribable. Enough is enough. This is a nightmare. When will it end? We really can't endure it anymore.
Suddenly, we woke up at 5:30 a.m. to the sound of aircraft, and suddenly they hit the area with 3 missiles. At first we thought it was a bit farther away, but then we surprisingly realized it was in our area, and this destruction happened.
Artillery is firing across the border. Tanks from the Israel Defense Forces have pushed into parts of southern Lebanon as ground operations expand. Israel says the objective is clear: destroy the military capabilities of Hezbollah. But while Israeli forces intensify their offensive, something unexpected has happened on the other side of the battlefield. Rockets fired from Lebanon struck central Israel without triggering the usual warning sirens. The Israeli military has confirmed the incident. Air raid alerts failed to sound before the rockets landed. For a country built on rapid early warning systems, the moment has triggered serious concern. Israel's defense network normally detects incoming projectiles and alerts civilians within seconds. Sirens give residents precious time to rush to shelters. This time, that warning never came. Security analysts say the rockets may have been launched at low altitude or from short distances, reducing detection time. At the same time, Israeli officials acknowledge another challenge. The military is struggling to intercept Hezbollah drones launched from Lebanon. Some of these drones fly low, change course mid-flight, and approach targets from unexpected directions. This makes them harder to track and intercept. Hezbollah says, in wake of attacks from Israel, it has no choice but to retaliate in self-defense.
Our goal is clear and specific: to expel the enemy from our occupied land, to stop its attacks and violations by air, sea, and land, to liberate the prisoners and return them to their families, to end the targeting of our people and their security, to ensure the unimpeded return of residents to their villages, and to rebuild their towns and homes.
The counter-attacks from Hezbollah, along with Iranian counterstrikes, are making things complicated for Israeli defense forces. Bureau report, WION World is One.
All right, joining me on GRAVITAS tonight is somebody who has been voicing his opinions on Donald Trump. He is Donald Trump's former national security advisor and the former ambassador of United States to the United Nations. Mr. John Bolton is joining us on GRAVITAS. Mr. Bolton, good evening. Welcome to WION. I want to start by asking you, this is the 12th day of this entire West Asia conflict of Israeli strikes and American strikes against Iran. Just a short while back, Donald Trump has said there is nothing left to target in Iran. What is your assessment of this conflict so far in these past 12 days?
Right. Well, I support regime change in Iran because I don't think there's any other way to resolve the nuclear threat that the regime poses or the terrorism threat that the regime poses. as of right now, it's very hard to know what Donald Trump's objective is. He has said, in many respects, regime change is the goal, but that is contradicted by other statements he's made since the attacks begun and other statements made by his senior advisors. Yesterday, the White House press secretary said the war will be over when President Trump announces that his objectives have been achieved. Well, that's great. That could mean today. That could mean a year from now. We just don't know. And that's what worries me, because I do think there's a strong and compelling case that can be made for regime change, but Trump hasn't made it yet. He hasn't made it to the American people. He hasn't made it to Congress. He hasn't made it to our friends and allies. And, we're risking here getting into a circumstance where we do a lot of damage to Iran, but the regime remains in place. And in a relatively short period of time, we're right back to where we started.
Ambassador Bolton, you're also somebody who's privy to White House conversations. You have been present there during the first presidency of Donald Trump. Help us understand how, his entire stance, has it changed at all from the previous presidency? And also on the question of Europe, these are allies who have supported Donald Trump through his first presidency and the second one now. But now they're pretty hesitant to directly join this war.
Different countries have really taken different perspectives. But I do think that the fact that Trump didn't keep the allies informed and really didn't make the case for regime change to them either, in both the case of the Congress and the American public and foreign governments, there was no need immediately to detail what the war plans were, what the timing was. It's a question of getting them on board politically with the objectives. And I think a lot of people in Europe found out about it at whatever their time was, at 2:30 in the morning American time on Saturday a week ago when Trump announced it. 2:30 in the morning, hardly the time you announce an attack in typical circumstances, but certainly the allies were not prepared, and I think they're inhibited because they don't feel that Trump fully states what his objectives are. They don't want to get in a war where they don't know what the objectives are.
What about Russia, Ambassador Bolton? We've had this, entire talk and speculation about Russia's role in this conflict. Donald Trump has spoken with Vladimir Putin, and now he says that the Russian president wants to be helpful in this conflict. Do you see this as the much-needed off-ramp in this conflict, or do you see this as a face-saving, tactic by the American president?
Well, I think those things are possible. I think what Putin is looking to do is leverage the intelligence that it's been reported he's supplying to the Iranian government. There's reporting this morning in the United States that they're doing other things, consulting with Iran on the use of drones and so on, which obviously Russia's had considerable experience using Iranian drones against the Ukrainian forces in the war there. So I think Putin would like to leverage that advantage against Trump in Ukraine. I think that's more what's on his mind than an off-ramp, although if he could maintain Trump's belief that he and Putin are friends by providing an off-ramp in Iran, that would make Trump even more grateful to Putin, which would pose inevitably more problems for Ukraine.
Ambassador Bolton, there have been a lot of questions that have been posed to the American president as far as getting boots on ground is concerned. He has not given really a clear yes or a no, but if it comes to that, would it be considered a big setback for America, considering that perhaps America hasn't been able to achieve what it set out to with the strikes?
The initial thing they said was 4 to 5 weeks at a minimum. I think that's clear. I think it's going to need to be more than that. They seem to be very surprised that oil prices rose after the war began because of the fear that the Strait of Hormuz would close. I'm surprised that they're surprised. But it does show part of that lack of planning and forethought that could have allowed better preparation, quicker response, quicker remedy to the issue. I don't think Trump really wants to put boots on the ground. That's another thing he said he wasn't going to do. And I don't think it's necessary. I think done correctly, the effect of these attacks on the Revolutionary Guard, the Quds Force, the besieging militia, the ballistic missile and nuclear programs, not only destroying those capabilities, which is a positive thing in and of itself, but they are shattering regime confidence that it can defend itself. In fact, they're showing just how vulnerable the regime is. And that should sow even more dissent and disagreement within the regime, which has had considerable portions of its leadership eliminated by the Israeli-U.S. strikes. And it's that kind of instability that the opposition should be exploiting, going to officers in the regular army, not the Revolutionary Guard, but the regular army, and finding some who would come over to the opposition side, who don't want to go down with the sinking ship. That's the way you claw the opposition. The opposition claws its way into the top levels of the regime, encourages disagreement and dissent, and therefore even more instability that permits the regime to collapse. That's what we should be trying to do.
Ambassador Bolton, let me then also understand from you how you see the retaliation that is happening from the Iranian side. Hezbollah has been able to strike central Israel, which means they have been able to pierce through the security dome system that Israel has. And that, has caused concerns across Israel and America. But there have been coordinated attacks from Hezbollah, Houthis and Hamas. How do you see this entire conflict then moving forward, considering that now Iran has got these proxies to fight for it?
Well, I think there's certainly some attacks, but I think Israel and the government of Lebanon, for the first time in a long time, are cooperating together against Hezbollah. And I think if you looked at the amount of tonnage of bombs being dropped on Iran comparing to the tonnage of bombs being dropped on Israel, U.S. bases, the Gulf Arab countries, overwhelmingly on Iran. They're the ones who are suffering the damage. I think the Iranians made a critical mistake in attacking the Gulf Arab countries, the oil-producing monarchies. I think that's driven those states closer to the U.S. and Israel. And I think that certainly Israel was prepared. That's why they're getting ready to go in perhaps to southern Lebanon sometime soon to do more damage to Hezbollah, which, since the Hamas attack of October 7, 2023, Iran's surrogate terrorist groups have been decimated, certainly Hamas and Hezbollah. There's more to do, but the balance of power really had changed in the Middle East, really changed even before the U.S.-Israel attack began.
Let me also then understand from you, the upcoming midterms. There are obviously concerns for the Republicans and Donald Trump that the November elections are here and they haven't been able to, woo their voters as far as not going into a war is concerned. Now, MAGA supporters have also been voicing their opinions that they're unhappy with this kind of a move. And therefore, do you think in the next few weeks and months leading up to the midterms, Donald Trump and his colleagues in the cabinet would be able to control and stabilize the situation and make sure the voters do go ahead with Republicans in November?
I think this is a big problem for Trump, in part because he didn't prepare the voters beforehand. If you reason with the American people and say, here's this Iranian threat, it's extremely serious. We've tried for 25 years to resolve it diplomatically. It isn't going to work. I think we can solve it by regime change. You would start out with a bigger base of support. The polls indicate that the support for this war is the lowest for any American military action since World War II. So that's not a good place to start because typically support only goes down over time. And this, again, appears to be something Trump just simply did not think through in advance carefully enough how he would handle the domestic politics. And he's not going to be on the ballot this November. Republican members of the House and Senate are, and in many state elections, they are, I can tell you already, very nervous. They were nervous before the attack started. As gasoline prices rise, they're getting more nervous.
All right, I'll leave it there. Ambassador John Bolton, thank you very much for sparing the time and joining us on WION and helping our viewers understand the present situation. The United States Navy has discovered a quiet but significant problem in its future strike power, with issues emerging during routine planning for the retirement of 4 aging submarines. The root of the problem lies with 4 special submarines, the guided missile versions of the Ohio class. These boats were originally built as nuclear ballistic missile submarines during the Cold War, but they were later converted to carry conventional cruise missiles. For years, these submarines operated quietly across the Pacific and Indian Oceans, carrying out several missions, but a sharp drop in the number of missile launch cells available in the coming years is raising alarm. Each of these submarines was modified to carry 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Together, these 4 boats provide a massive total of 616 missile launch tubes, making them some of the most powerful strike platforms in the American Navy. However, these submarines are now more than 3 decades old, and their nuclear reactors are approaching the end of their safe operating life shelf. The Navy plans to retire them in the coming years. When planners looked at what would happen after their retirement, they discovered a much bigger issue. Combined with the retirement of older surface warships, the Navy could lose as many as 2,080 missile launch cells from its overall force structure. The Ohio-class submarines, remember, provide something unique. They're attack submarines and they can operate quietly, but they carry far fewer missiles. Surface warships can carry many weapons, but are more vulnerable and easier to track. The Ohio class sits in a rare middle ground with massive firepower combined with undersea stealth. The American Navy is already building the next generation of submarines, the Columbia class. However, these new boats are designed for a different role. They are meant to carry nuclear ballistic missiles as part of America's strategic deterrence, not conventional Tomahawk strike missions. Meanwhile, newer Virginia-class attack submarines are being upgraded as well with what is called the Virginia Payload Module. Now, this design adds extra space for Tomahawk missiles. But even with this upgrade, the difference is huge. A Virginia-class submarine can add about 28 additional missile cells, far less than 154 missiles carried by a single Ohio-class guided missile submarine. The 4 submarines at the center of this issue, USS Ohio, USS Michigan, USS Florida, and USS Georgia, were never meant to serve forever. They were designed as a bridge between Cold War nuclear missions and modern conventional strike operations. And their retirement will certainly be a strategic concern for the American Navy.